So let me get this straight. Someone trespassed onto your property to remove a bird feeder? Officer Daniels flipped open his notepad, pen hovering above the blank page. Destroyed it, actually. I pointed to the pile of splintered wood and scattered birdseed that had greeted me this morning. And left this. He read the note aloud. This unsightly feeding station was removed for violating community aesthetic standards. Sincerely, a concerned neighbor. Officer Daniels cleared his throat. You, have any idea who this concerned neighbor might be? I sighed. 3 guesses, and the first 2 don't count. Her name is Karen Westbrook, and she's been waging war on my birds for months. Birds aren't technically your property, sir. No, but the feeder was, and it was a gift from my late grandfather. The officer had the decency to look sympathetic as he jotted notes. Look, Dr. Foster, I understand this is frustrating, but without actual proof of who did this. I know, it's a civil matter. I'd heard that phrase a lot lately. Well, I'll file the report for the vandalism. Maybe consider setting up a camera? He handed me a copy of the report. Just try not to escalate things, all right? As his patrol car pulled away, I knelt to collect the broken pieces of my grandfather's hand-carved cedar feeder. The craftsmanship was unmistakable. The tiny carved chickadees along the roof, the meticulously fitted joints. I'd brought it with me when I moved here after the divorce, one of the few things that made this new house feel like home. A cardinal landed on my fence, cocked its head at the absence of its usual breakfast spot, and flew away. That was the moment I decided. Karen Westbrook had picked the wrong ornithologist to mess with. To understand the gravity of the situation, you need to know a few things about me. I'm Dr. Alex Foster, Associate Professor of Ornithology at Midland University. Until 6 months ago, I lived in a comfortable faculty apartment near campus with my wife of 8 years. Then came the separation, the divorce, and the realization that a 1-bedroom apartment doesn't heal a broken heart. So I bought this modest house in Oak Ridge Heights, a quiet suburb 15 minutes from campus. The backyard backed up to a small, wooded area, perfect for my research and personal passion. Birds. I'd spent the first month setting up various feeding stations, native plants, and a small pond. My little ecosystem became my therapy. And for a while, it worked. The birds came, cardinals, chickadees, titmice, wrens, and even a pair of indigo buntings. Local kids started stopping by to watch, and I'd give impromptu lessons about native species. My little corner of suburban wilderness was becoming a neighborhood bright spot, until Karen moved in next door. Mr. Foster, Karen's voice carried over the fence before I even saw her. A word, please. I stepped out onto my patio. Good morning, Karen. And it's Dr. Foster, actually. Is it? She clutched her designer coffee mug, her immaculate blonde bob unmoving despite the breeze. I've been awake since 5 a.m. Do you know why? The Cardinal family, they had chicks last week. Beautiful, aren't they? Beautiful. Her smile thinned to a line. Try cacophonous. This isn't a wildlife sanctuary, Dr. Foster. It's a residential neighborhood. Birds are part of nature, Karen. They were here before us. Well, they weren't outside my bedroom window before you moved in with your avian soup kitchen. She gestured to my collection of feeders. The Homeowners Association will be hearing about this. We don't have an HOA. This is a public neighborhood. Her eyes narrowed. Then I'll start one. That had been the opening salvo 3 weeks ago. Since then, she'd called animal control about excessive wildlife, complained to the city about unsanitary conditions, and circulated a petition about noise pollution. All without success. Until now. Destroying my grandfather's feeder. That was crossing a line. Remote-controlled bird feeders? My research assistant, Zoe, raised an eyebrow at my browser history. Planning to feed birds from your office now? Not exactly, I replied, clicking through design specs. More like automated precision delivery systems. You mean like those t-shirt cannons at basketball games, but for seeds? She laughed, then stopped when she saw my expression. Wait, you're serious? My neighbor destroyed my grandfather's bird feeder. The police called it a civil matter. So I'm getting creative. Zoe slid into the chair beside me. Tell me everything, and yes, I know exactly which engineering students can help us. By lunchtime, Zoe had arranged a meeting with Professor Haruki from Robotics Engineering and 3 of his graduate students. I explained my situation, expecting skepticism. Instead, I found enthusiasm. A targeted seed delivery system with species recognition capabilities? Professor Haruki's eyes lit up behind his round glasses. The applications go far beyond neighbor revenge, Dr. Foster. Think about wildlife rehabilitation, endangered species support, migration pattern studies. I just want to feed birds without visible feeders, I clarified. Yes, but the technology. He was already sketching on a whiteboard. We can use computer vision to identify species, pneumatic launchers for the seed, and a centralized control system. The birds will appear to find food magically. One of his students, a lanky guy named Tyler, was nodding eagerly. We could use the new tracking algorithms we've been developing, the ones that can differentiate between similarly sized objects in motion. Perfect for distinguishing a house finch from a purple finch, I admitted, getting drawn into their enthusiasm despite myself. We'll need specialized components, Professor Haruki mused. Time to visit Hometown Hardware. You need how many servo motors? Frank, the manager at Hometown Hardware, scratched his head with a pencil. 12, I repeated. And these specific laser targeting modules. He squinted at my list. This isn't for one of those robot battle competitions, is it? Last time I supplied parts for that, the library got set on fire. It's for birds, I assured him. Feeding birds. With lasers? Laser-guided feeding systems. I pulled up a rough sketch on my phone. Completely harmless. Frank sighed. This have anything to do with that woman who was in here yesterday? Blonde Bob? Asked about neighborhood ordinances and pest control? I stiffened. Karen's been here? Oh, so you do know her. Frank chuckled. She wanted to know if our rat poison would work on squirrels. I told her that's illegal. He started gathering my parts. Whatever you're planning, make it good. That woman's been terrorizing half the town with her complaints. As it turned out, Karen Westbrook had built quite a reputation in the 6 months since she'd moved to Oak Ridge Heights. The barista at the local coffee shop had been reported for excessive greeting enthusiasm. The elementary school had received complaints about disruptive playground laughter. Even the public library had a run-in over their aggressively modern new sign. I was just the latest target in her campaign for suburban perfection. With hardware acquired, we began developing the prototype for what Professor Haruki insisted on calling the Precision Ornithological Feed Delivery System, POFDS, pronounced POFIDS. No! Professor Haruki slammed his fist on the workbench, sending small components flying. You're thinking like an ornithologist, not an engineer. I blinked at the eccentric robotics professor. I am an ornithologist. Exactly the problem, he replied, pushing his wild gray hair back. Birds don't move in predictable patterns. You need to anticipate, not react. We need predictive algorithms, not just motion tracking. So, what are you suggesting? His eyes gleamed. Machine learning. We feed the system thousands of hours of bird flight patterns, feeding behaviors, species recognition. Then, he made an explosive gesture with his hands. It doesn't just react to the birds, it anticipates where they'll be. That sounds complicated. The best revenge always is, he said with a grin. Besides, think of the research possibilities. We could publish this. I just want to feed some birds without my neighbor having a meltdown. And I want to shoot seeds at 30 meters per second with millimeter precision, Professor Haruki countered. We all have dreams, Dr. Foster. For 3 weeks, we worked on the system. I provided video footage from my research archives for the recognition software. Tyler and the other grad students developed the launcher mechanisms. Professor Haruki oversaw the integration of the components into a cohesive system. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't idle. Motion-activated sprinklers appeared along our shared property line. Anti-bird spikes went up on her fence. She even installed an ultrasonic pest deterrent device aimed at my yard, which I promptly reported as it could harm bats and other beneficial wildlife. It was all-out suburban warfare. "Target Sparrow at 2 o'clock, Zoe announced, monitoring the tablet that showed our system's camera feed. "Acquiring target," Professor Haruki replied, with unnecessary military formality. "Feed solution calculated, trajectory plotted." "It's a bird feeder, not a missile launch," I reminded them. 3, 2, 1, launch! With a soft p, the launcher sent a perfect small pellet of mixed seed across the courtyard. It landed precisely in front of a startled sparrow, who looked around in confusion before happily pecking at the unexpected treat. "Direct hit!" Zoe high-fived Haruki. I checked the tablet. "Impressive, but can it handle multiple birds? Or distinguish between species to deliver appropriate feed?" "You wound me," Haruki said, clutching his heart dramatically. "Watch this." He tapped a sequence on the control panel. The launcher pivoted smoothly, identifying and delivering custom seed mixes to 3 different birds in rapid succession. "It's beautiful," I whispered. A campus security officer approached us. "Professor Foster, we've received a complaint about unauthorized projectiles being fired on university grounds. Who would—" I stopped, spotting a familiar blonde bob ducking behind a distant tree. "You've got to be kidding me. She followed me to work?" The security officer followed my gaze. "Is that the same woman who called about the suspicious gathering of crows during your field class last week?" "The very same," he sighed. "Look, I don't care what you're doing as long as it's not damaging university property, but maybe take it off campus?" It was time to bring POFDs home. "So, this is where you want the system installed?" Marco gestured to the elm tree in my backyard. "Yes. We need power run from the house, weatherproofing for all components, and this precise mounting angle." I showed him our specs. Marco whistled. "That's the most complicated bird feeder I've ever seen. You sure this is just about birds?" I hesitated. "It's a research project, and a personal matter." "Would this personal matter involve the lady who's been parked across the street taking pictures of your house for the last 20 minutes? I spun around. Sure enough, there was Karen's white SUV, poorly hidden behind a delivery truck. "That's her," I sighed. "Say no more." Marco lowered his voice. "She tried to get my contracting license revoked last year because my cruise truck was parked 6 inches over her property line." He looked over the plans again. "I'll do this installation at cost, and I know exactly how to keep components hidden from street view." "I appreciate that, but everything here is completely legal." "Of course it is," Marco winked. "Just like my truck was legally parked. Let's call this Karma installation." Over the next 2 days, Marco and his team installed the POFDS with remarkable discretion. Launcher units were camouflaged as decorative birdhouses. The central control unit was disguised as a garden gnome. Weather-resistant cameras were hidden in foliage and tree branches. By the time they finished, my yard looked completely normal. except for the conspicuous absence of traditional bird feeders. "System online," I announced to my small audience of Zoe, Haruki, and Marco. "Now we wait for birds." "How long does that typically take?" Marco asked, checking his watch. As if on cue, a blue jay landed on the fence. The system hummed quietly to life, its hidden cameras tracking the bird. With a soft pfft, a small cluster of peanuts launched in a perfect arc, landing gently in front of the jay. Identification: Cyanocita cristata. Feed type: appropriate. Delivery: accurate. Zoe read from the monitoring tablet. The blue jay, momentarily startled, quickly discovered the peanuts and began to eat. "One success," I said cautiously. "Let's see how it handles multiple—" Before I could finish, a group of finches descended on the yard. The system worked flawlessly, delivering tiny millet clusters to different locations, spacing them out so the smaller birds wouldn't compete. "It's identifying individual birds within the species," Haruki whispered, awestruck by his own creation. "The algorithm is already learning." We watched in amazement as more birds arrived, and the system continued to function perfectly. No conventional feeders in sight. Just birds seemingly finding seed that appeared exactly where they landed. "Dr. Foster?" Marco pointed to the fence. "You've got company." Karen stood at the edge of her property, mouth agape, phone in hand. Our eyes met, and I gave her a cheerful wave. "Beautiful day for birdwatching, isn't it?" I called out. "Where are the feeders?" she demanded, scanning my yard. "What feeders? I don't see any feeders." I smiled innocently. "Just birds enjoying my yard. Nothing against the law about that, is there?" Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "You're up to something." "Just enjoying nature, Karen. Same as always." She pointed her phone at my yard, taking more pictures, before marching back to her house. I knew this wasn't over. Over the next week, Karen launched a new campaign. Daily emails to neighborhood residents about unusual activities at my property. Calls to various authorities about everything from zoning violations to electrical hazards. She even started a neighborhood watch group that seemed to focus exclusively on my house. The attention drew more interest than she intended. Neighbors began stopping by, curious about why birds were flocking to my yard despite no visible feeders. "Mr. Foster, I'm Rachel Winters from Animal Control." The young woman at my door looked apologetic. "We've received, several dozen complaints about your property." "Let me guess, birds?" "Actually, the complainant has suggested you're using sonic devices and unauthorized food distribution technologies that could be harmful to wildlife." I laughed despite myself. "Would you like to see my yard? I assure you the birds are quite happy." I led her through to the backyard, where several species were contentedly feeding from invisible seed placements. "Where's the food coming from?" she asked, looking genuinely puzzled. "It's a new feeding system I'm developing as part of my university research," I explained. "Completely harmless. It uses small pneumatic launchers to place seed exactly where birds prefer to feed." "Launchers? Like shooting food?" "At very low velocity, less impactful than seed falling from a tree naturally." As we talked, the system detected a cardinal and delivered a perfect small pile of sunflower seeds. Rachel's eyes widened. "That's actually amazing. I've never seen anything like it. Thank you. It's designed to reduce waste, prevent non-native species from accessing inappropriate food, and eliminate the ground accumulation that attracts rodents, which was one of my neighbor's complaints." "Well," Rachel said, typing notes into her tablet, "I don't see anything concerning here. In fact, this seems more humane than traditional feeders." She paused. "The complainant also mentioned lasers?" "Just for targeting, like a laser pointer. No harm to the birds." I demonstrated with the control tablet showing how the system identified birds. Dr. Foster, would you consider presenting this system at our next department meeting? We've been looking for ways to rehabilitate birds without creating dependency. From over the fence, I heard a distinct growl of frustration. So this is the famous laser bird system. Elliot, the retired physics teacher from 3 doors down, circled my yard with obvious delight. I've been hearing about this for weeks. Karen's been talking about it? I asked. Non-stop. She came to the neighborhood watch meeting with a 15-slide presentation about technological terrorism against community standards. He chuckled. Backfired completely. Now everyone wants to see it. That explained the steady stream of curious neighbors who'd been stopping by. What had started as a personal vendetta was turning into a local attraction. Would you mind demonstrating for the Bird Enthusiasts Club next weekend? Elliot asked. We've got 15 members who'd love to see this in action. There's a Bird Enthusiasts Club in the neighborhood? There is now, he winked. Founded it yesterday. Karen tried to join but was unanimously rejected due to her known anti-avian bias. I agreed to the demonstration, partly out of professional enthusiasm and partly to stick it to Karen. My petty side was definitely winning this battle. As I fine-tuned the system for the upcoming demonstration, I noticed a few concerning glitches. Occasionally, Seed would launch when no birds were present. The facial recognition sometimes tagged squirrels as birds, resulting in inappropriate feed distribution. Most worryingly, the system seemed to be developing a slight delay in its targeting algorithm. Nothing to worry about, Haruki assured me when I called him. Just typical AI learning curve stuff. The system is adapting to its environment. Should we postpone the demonstration? Absolutely not! A few glitches add to the charm. Science in progress. His enthusiasm was contagious, but I still had reservations. That evening, as I was making final adjustments, the doorbell rang. Dr. Foster? A man in an expensive suit stood at my door. Walter Westbrook, Karen's husband. I braced myself. Mr. Westbrook, May I come in? I believe we should talk. I reluctantly let him in, leading him to the living room. I want to apologize, he said immediately, surprising me. Karen has been fixated on this situation. It's consuming her. I'm sorry to hear that, but she did destroy my grandfather's bird feeder. I know, and that was inexcusable. He looked genuinely remorseful. She's going through some things. The birds were just an easy target. What kind of things? She lost her job 6 months ago. Investment firm downsizing. She was a vice president for 12 years. And suddenly, he trailed off. The neighborhood became her new office. All this control and rules, it's her way of feeling useful again. I didn't know what to say. My righteous indignation was being complicated by actual human empathy. I'm not asking you to dismantle your impressive system, Walter continued. Just maybe we could find some middle ground? Her birthday is next week, and I thought... A seed pod suddenly launched across the room, hitting a lamp. Walter blinked. Is that part of the system? Technical glitch, I admitted. Still working out some bugs? The conversation with Walter left me conflicted. On one hand, Karen had been unreasonable and destructive. On the other hand, I understood the disorientation of having your life upended. My divorce had sent me spiraling for months. But before I could decide on a peace offering, the day of the Bird Enthusiasts Club demonstration arrived. And as you can see, the system intelligently differentiates between species, I explained to the assembled group of neighbors. Fascinating, Mrs. Abernathy said, adjusting her binoculars. And it knows exactly what each bird prefers? Precisely. For instance, when it detects a loud beep interrupted me. The control tablet flashed a warning. Update complete rebooting. That's strange, I muttered. I didn't authorize any updates. Haruki pushed through the crowd. Alex, did you activate the beta version? What? No, The system let out a mechanical whir. Suddenly, all the launcher units rotated at once. Target acquired. Multiple targets, the tablet displayed. Everyone down! Haruki yelled, just as the first seed pod launched, directly at Mr. Peterson's toupee. The yard erupted in chaos as the system began rapid-firing seed pods at everything that moved. Mrs. Abernathy's hat was knocked off, seed bounced off the lemonade pitcher, and Elliot dove behind a shrub as a barrage of sunflower seeds peppered the spot where he'd been standing. "Shut it down!" I shouted, frantically tapping the emergency stop button. "I can't access it remotely," Haruki called back. "Someone's overridden the controls." From across the fence, we heard unmistakable laughter. The seed barrage continued for another minute before I managed to reach the main power line and physically disconnect it. By then, my yard looked like a birdseed war zone. Neighbors were picking seeds out of their hair and clothing, laughing nervously. "Well," Elliot said, brushing Millet off his shoulders, "that was certainly the most exciting bird club meeting we've ever had." Officer Daniels arrived 15 minutes later, responding to calls about a backyard artillery attack. "So let me make sure I have this straight," he said, flipping through his notepad. "Mrs. Westbrook hired a teenager to hack your bird feeders." "They're not technically feeders," I began before Haruki elbowed me. "Yes," I corrected. That's exactly what happened. Karen stood on her patio, arms crossed. "I did no such thing. The system is clearly dangerous and malfunctioned on its own." "Ma'am, we have the teenager's statement," Officer Daniels replied. "And the Venmo transaction from your account labeled Bird Revenge." Karen's face flushed. "Are you pressing charges, Dr. Foster?" Daniels asked me. I looked at Karen, then at Walter standing beside her looking mortified. "No," I decided, "but I would like the cost of repairs covered and an agreement that my property will be left alone from now on." "That's very generous," Daniels said. "Mrs. Westbrook." "Fine," she said through gritted teeth. "But those birds—" "Will continue to visit my yard," I finished. "Nature isn't something you can control, Karen." As Daniels left, the neighbors helped clean up the seed explosion, turning it into an impromptu block party. Someone brought out a barbecue. Someone else produced a cooler of drinks. Children made games of collecting seeds into piles for birds to find later. By sunset, my yard had transformed from a seed disaster zone to a community gathering space. Karen and Walter watched from their deck, her expression unreadable, his clearly longing to join the fun. The next morning, I inspected the POFDS components. The hack had caused minimal physical damage, but the software was corrupted. It would take time to rebuild the system. As I contemplated repairs, an idea occurred to me. Maybe Walter's suggestion of finding middle ground wasn't so impossible after all. That afternoon, I knocked on Karen's door. She answered with suspicion. "What do you want?" "To offer a compromise." I handed her a tablet. "This is a modified controller for a single launcher unit. I'd like to install it in your yard." "You want to install a special launcher in our yard?" Karen asked suspiciously. "A single unit," I clarified, "positioned to attract the hummingbirds you mentioned Walter likes. It would be completely under your control. Timing, frequency, everything." "Why would you do this after everything that's happened?" "Because birds don't care about human feuds, and neither should we, really." Walter appeared behind her. "I think it's a wonderful idea. Don't you, dear?" Karen looked between us, suspicion slowly giving way to curiosity. "I get to control it?" "Completely. And I've built in a silent mode specially designed for early mornings. I might be willing to try, she conceded. The installation was completed the next day. A simple, elegant system that delivered hummingbird nectar on command. Karen watched the process with guarded interest, asking surprisingly informed questions about hummingbird species and feeding patterns. Over the following weeks, I rebuilt the POFDS 2.0 in my yard. Quieter, more accurate, and with improved security features. Karen's single launcher evolved into 2, then 3, as she discovered the joy of attracting different hummingbird species. We maintained a respectful distance, but the open hostility faded. She even joined the Bird Enthusiasts Club, sitting far away from me but participating actively in discussions about migration patterns. Dr. Foster, this is remarkable technology, Dean Williams said, watching the system operate during her visit. The university would like to discuss patent options. Patent options? I repeated. Professor Haruki already submitted the preliminary paperwork. This has applications beyond feeding birds, precision delivery of treatments in wildlife rehabilitation, targeted seed dispersal in reforestation efforts. It was just supposed to annoy my neighbor, I admitted. The greatest innovations often start with petty motivations, she replied with a smile. Edison and Tesla were rivals, after all. As we talked, I spotted Karen in her yard, quietly watching a hummingbird at her new feeder. Sometimes good things come from unexpected places, I said. 6 months after the Great Seed Launcher incident, as it came to be known in Oak Ridge Heights, I hosted a bird-watching brunch for the neighborhood. The POFDS 2.0 operated flawlessly, delivering precise feeds to a dazzling variety of birds. To my surprise, Karen made a brief appearance, maintaining her distance but acknowledging me with a nod. As she left, she handed me a package wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a handcrafted bird feeder, remarkably similar to the one she'd destroyed. The note read, "Some traditions are worth keeping alongside innovation." I installed it that afternoon, right next to one of the POFDS launchers, old and new technology coexisting, much like the neighbors who had learned to do the same. The next morning, I watched from my kitchen window as a cardinal landed on the traditional feeder, ate a few seeds, then hopped over to receive a perfect small pile from the launcher. The bird seemed equally happy with both methods of delivery. Nature, I reflected, doesn't care about our human conflicts and technologies. It adapts, persists, and finds a way to thrive in whatever environment we create. Perhaps we could learn something from that. As I sipped my coffee, Karen's backyard hummingbird launcher activated, sending a perfect drop of nectar to a hovering, ruby-throated visitor. Across the fence, I caught a glimpse of her watching from her window, a small smile on her face. In the suburban ecosystem, we had found our balance,